At start, it seemed like a perfect place for Grace to start her career as a barista. But there was something off about the shop that Grace couldn't quite put her finger on. Every evening, as the clock struck 8, the place emptied, save for a few regulars who lingered a bit too long. The shop was quiet, too quiet. One night, Grace stayed late to finish some inventory. The floorboards creaked under her feet as she moved around the back room. She was halfway through counting the stock when she heard a soft whisper. "Grace, Grace." The voice was low, faint, like a breath against her ear. She spun around, but no one was there. The room was empty. Her heart raced. She chalked it up to fatigue, but then it happened again. This time, louder, coming from behind her. "Grace, come closer." It wasn't just any voice, it was the voice of a man she'd never heard before. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, her hand instinctively reaching for her phone, but the battery was dead. Panic began to claw at her chest. Suddenly the lights flickered, then went out. The only illumination was from the street lamp outside, casting a dim glow through the windows. Grace fumbled for her phone, but in that instant, the temperature in the room plummeted, and she could see her breath forming in the cold air. She heard footsteps, soft, dragging steps moving toward her. Her pulse quickened as the air around her thickened. She turned, expecting to see one of the regulars, but there was nothing there, just shadows and the faint scent of burnt coffee. Then she heard a man's laugh, dry and raspy, coming from the back corner of the shop. She had never heard that laugh before, but it sent chills down her spine. The door to the back room creaked open by itself, as if beckoning her to follow. Without thinking, she grabbed her jacket and bolted for the exit. As she reached the door, it slammed shut, trapping her inside. Her eyes darted around the room, now completely dark, save for the faint glow from the street lamp. That was when she saw it standing at the counter, with the dim light barely illuminating it, was a shadowy figure. It wasn't a man, but a twisted silhouette, almost like a reflection in the glass. Its face was distorted, its body unnaturally long. Then the whisper came again, this time louder and more urgent. "You shouldn't have stayed, Grace." The next morning, the cafe was back to normal, and the manager acted like nothing had happened. But Grace knew she wasn't imagining it. She left her shift early and never returned. The cafe, she heard later, had a tragic history. A previous owner, a man named Samuel, had died in a fire right behind the counter, and now, it seemed, his spirit lingered, waiting for someone to stay after hours. The Café Serenade had a reputation for being the best coffee shop in the city. Situated on a quiet street, it was a cozy haven for locals. But what most people didn't know was that it was built on the site of an old apartment building, one that had burned down decades ago in a tragic fire. The fire had claimed several lives, but the one that stood out was the story of a young woman named Margaret, who was trapped in the building during the blaze. She had tried to escape, but the smoke had overcome her, and her body was never recovered. It was late in the evening when Peter, a new employee, was working the late shift at Café Serenade. The shop was nearly empty, save for a few patrons who were talking quietly in the corner. It was the last hour of the day, and Peter had just finished cleaning the espresso machine. He was about to lock the door when he noticed something strange, a cup of coffee, untouched, sitting on the counter. It hadn't been there when he started cleaning, and the barista station had been empty. Confused, Peter approached it, his footsteps muffled against the polished floor. He picked up the cup, expecting it to be warm, but instead it was ice cold, the liquid inside unnaturally still. That's when he heard it, a soft rustling from the back, the sound of something moving. His heart skipped a beat as he glanced toward the kitchen door, which was slightly ajar. The sound came again, followed by the faintest of whispers. "Help me! Help me!" Peter stood frozen. The whispers grew louder, a woman's voice pleading. But it didn't sound human. It was an eerie, hollow sound, like it came from a distant memory. He had been warned about the shop's history, but he never believed it. Until now. He approached the kitchen slowly, the air around him growing colder with every step. As he reached for the door, it slammed shut with a violent bang. The lights flickered, and the door swung open again, this time revealing the kitchen in complete disarray, as if someone had ransacked it. The coffee machines were shaking, and the floor was covered with scattered cups and saucers. Peter felt the hair on the back of his neck rise as the whispering returned, louder now, and the voice became clearer. "Margaret! Margaret! Help!" The cup of coffee on the counter rattled, and Peter instinctively took a step back, bumping into something cold and solid. He spun around to find a woman standing there, her figure blurred, as if she was fading in and out of existence. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. Her clothes were tattered, blackened with soot, as if she had been through the fire herself. Peter stumbled backward, heart racing, but the figure didn't move. Instead, it pointed toward the door, its mouth opening in a silent scream. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and the lights went out, plunging the cafe into darkness. When they flickered back on, the woman was gone, and the room was completely still. Peter didn't wait. He rushed to the front door, locked it, and called for help. He never returned to the cafe after that night. The staff said that the shop had a history of strange occurrences. Margaret's spirit, they believed, was forever trapped in the place, reliving her last moments, and anyone who stayed late was cursed to experience her tragic fate. For years, the Brood Lantern had been a beloved coffee shop known for its unique blend of locally sourced beans and its comfortable atmosphere. The owner, Sarah, had always maintained a tight-knit crew, and they had a regular crowd of customers who came every morning and evening. But the cafe had a dark past that Sarah had never shared with the staff. There had been rumors of an unsolved murder that took place in the shop's basement long before Sarah had taken over. No one knew the details, but it was said that the spirit of the victim still haunted the place. One night, Sarah decided to stay late to prepare some new recipes for the morning. It was a slow night, and the cafe was empty, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of cups as she cleaned. As the clock ticked past midnight, she felt a strange sensation in the pit of her stomach, an overwhelming sense of being watched. She looked up from her work, her eyes scanning the empty room, but saw nothing unusual. Suddenly, she heard footsteps coming from the basement door. Sarah froze. The basement was locked, and no one had been down there all night. The footsteps grew louder, slow and deliberate, as if someone was walking in heavy boots. Her heart raced as she crept toward the door, which was slightly ajar. She called out, but there was no answer. The footsteps stopped. The silence was deafening. Then a cold gust of wind blew through the cafe, extinguishing the lights. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she felt the unmistakable presence of something standing behind her. She spun around, but again, there was nothing, just the echo of her own heartbeat. In the dim light, she saw the shadow of a man, tall and broad-shouldered, standing near the counter. His eyes were hollow, and his face was expressionless. He wore a black jacket, stained with dark, rust-like splotches. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Instead, an overpowering sense of dread filled the room, making it hard to breathe. Sarah tried to move, but her feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The man's figure began to blur, fading in and out like a glitch in a dream. Then, he pointed toward the basement door. The temperature dropped sharply, and Sarah could see her breath in the air. Desperate, she rushed to the door, flung it open, and stared down the dark staircase, leading into the basement. The air was thick with the stench of mildew, and the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally. As she stepped closer, she felt a sudden pressure, as though something was trying to pull her in. But then the door slammed shut behind her, and the lights flickered back on. The man was gone. The next morning, Sarah didn't open the cafe. She called in sick, and her staff knew something was wrong. The police later confirmed that the basement had been the site of a murder decades ago, and the ghost of the victim, the man who had been killed, was the one haunting the cafe. From that day on, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and every night she could still hear the soft, dragging footsteps in the basement. No one who worked there after dark ever stayed alone again. They all felt the presence always lurking in the shadows, waiting.